I didn't know that people needed an explanation on why Meklords failed, but here we are. If Meklords gameplay isn't a dead giveaway on why this deck is in the 5D's garbage can, nothing will. Being focused on the sole aspect of ruining Synchro monsters' lives doesn't scream terror to anybody, unless you really hate Baronne de Fleur, or your locals are just full of Synchron players. They did receive a boost, but that was for it to become a weak OTK machine that was easily interruptible. However, the archetype had a few cards played in the 5D's format spotlight, and were made a solid tech choice. It's too bad they didn't make a solid deck, and we'll explain why Meklords should have stayed an anime deck instead of a real one. Meklords' journey mostly starts in the 2011 TCG set Extreme Victory. However, a few of their cards were introduced as Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championship qualifier cards, and later introduced to the rest of the TCG as Shonen Jump promo cards throughout June and July of 2011. The one that made the most impact was Meklord Emperor Grinnell, a level 1 machine type monster with 0 attack and defense. It can't be normal summoned or set, and can only be special summoned from your hand when a card effect destroys a monster on your side of the field and sends it to the graveyard. Once per turn, you can absorb a Synchro monster your opponent controls, and this card gains an attack equal to half of your life points and the original attack of any monsters equipped to it. It also lets you target one monster equipped to it in special summoned defense position. Meklord Astro Mechanical was a level 12 machine with 4,000 attack and defense that also can't be normal summoned or set and can only be special summoned from your hand by sending 3 Meklord monsters from your hand to the graveyard. It had the standard once per turn effect of absorbing one of your opponent's Synchros and gaining an attack equal to the combined attack of all monsters equipped to it. Once per turn, during your standby phase, you can send one equipped monster to the graveyard to burn your opponent for damage equal to the attack of the monster set, but then you can't conduct your battle phase that turn. While Meklord as a whole archetype is doomed to make a lackluster impact on the meta, Grinnell actually made a great impression on players. The summoning conditions were easy to meet and just need a monster on your side of the field to be destroyed by a card effect, either by you or your opponent. This requirement meant you never had to wait for your opponent to pop your monsters to bring this card out if you had the means to pop your own monsters. Decks like Scraps had no issue bringing this card out, as most of the Scrap monsters' effects concerned popping monsters on your side of the field to gain resources. So not only could you accumulate resources, but you also got to summon a monster that equated to half your life points, which usually meant this card came out with 4,000 attack if you're going first or second. If anything, the card punished your opponent for playing cards that pop monsters at the time, like Raigeki Break or Lightning Vortex. As for Mechanical, it would barely see any play. What's the use of having a 4,000 attack monster that takes away your battle phase after burning your opponent? The cost was too steep, costing 3 Meklords from your hand to summon. And as you'll see in Extreme Victory, it would solidify that it's the right choice to not run the bum of a boss monster. Thank goodness it worked. Quick, we don't have time. I'm a blue version of you from the future and I need your help.
Oh, hey, do you like fast food?
We don't have time for this. The very timeline is in danger.
Do you like food but hate cooking?
Why, yes, I do.
Did you know that with Factor, you can eat delicious healthy meals without any prep time? And without the stress of having to buy ingredients and waste a whole bunch of time cooking?
That sounds too good to be true.
Everyone says that, until they try it. No prep, no mess, and it tastes just as good as if you cooked it yourself.
Wait, is this an ad? Are you using this once-in-a-lifetime experience to tell me about fast food?
Actually, with Factor, you won't need takeout anymore. You'll get a bunch of nutritious food delivered to your door every week.
Oh no. The connection's unstable. We've wasted too much time. Thanks to Factor 75 for sponsoring today's video. Go to Factor 75 TheDuelLogs and get 50% off your first Factor 75 box, plus free wellness shots for life. 2 free wellness shots per order with an active subscription. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code with your phone. Extreme Victory introduced not only Meklord Emperors and Meklord Astros, but also the Meklord Army cards. Meklord Army monsters gain an attack boost based on how many Meklord monsters on the field and had various effects. This is the nicest way to say they were basically fodder without being mean. Since there are 3 Meklord Emperors, there are 3 Army monsters, all being level 4. Meklord Army of Grinnell was an Earth Machine monster with 1600 attack and 1200 defense. It gains 100 attack for every other Meklord monster on the field. When this monster is normal summoned, you can target a face-up monster your opponent controls and cut its attack in half until the end of the turn. Meklord Army of Skeel was a Wind Machine monster with 1200 attack and 1000 defense. It gained 200 attack for each other Meklord monster on the field, and when it's destroyed by battle and sent to the grave, you can special summon a Meklord Army monster from your deck. Meklord Army of Weasel was a Dark Machine monster with 1800 attack and 0 defense. It gained 100 attack for each other Meklord monster, and once per turn, when another Meklord monster attacks your opponent's defense position monster, you can give that monster piercing damage. None of these effects stood out to help the Meklord deck. Meklord Army of Grinnell's effect only activated on normal summon, which meant this card was useless in any other situation except being fodder for mechanical, which you really didn't want to summon due to its steep cost. Army of Skill was a floater that can only get you another Meklord army monster. Its float effect was dependent on both battle and graveyard. If this card was destroyed by a card effect, you'd get nothing. If it was banished after being destroyed by battle, you'd still get nothing. In a deck that lacks synergy, the last thing you need is an inconsistent floater. Finally, Army of Skill was a battle phase oriented monster that couldn't even apply its effect to itself, and needed another monster on the field to be useful, subsequently making it useless. It was clear as day that these cards could only be useful as terrible beatsticks, helpless without their Meklord overlords. Meklord Emperor Skill was a level 1 wind machine monster with 2200 attack and defense. Like Grinnell, it could only be summoned by having one of your monsters destroyed by a card effect. Other monsters you control couldn't attack, and like every Meklord Emperor, you can target a Synchro monster your opponent controls and equip it, and then gain that monster's attack. You can send one monster equipped to this card to the graveyard to enable this card to attack your opponent directly this turn. Out of the Emperors introduced, this one was definitely the worst of them. Skill restricted you from attacking with your other monsters, making it difficult to finish off your opponent. Its effect was counterintuitive as well. Attacking directly with 2200 attack is decent, but the cost for doing it makes no sense, as you'd essentially lose the Synchro monster to apply the effect, making Skill lose the attack boost it gained. After attacking, you'd only have a 2200 attack monster that stops your other monsters from follow-up. Let's also not forget that the 5Ds era had a plethora of battle traps that Skill had no protection from. Grinnell stayed the best go-to option if you could get your hands on it. Meklord Astro Dragon Astris finishes up the monsters that debuted in Extreme Victory. This dark level 10 machine monster could only be special summoned from your hand by controlling 3 or more Meklord monsters. When special summoned, you can send any number of Meklord monsters to the grave to have this card gain the combined original attacks of all the monsters sent to the graveyard with its effect. Each time a single monster is special summoned, inflict 1000 damage to your opponent. Once again, Meklord boss monsters suffer from making a big trade-off for their effects. Not only do you have to control 3 monsters on your side of the field in a deck that doesn't have much special summon ability, but you'd have to then lose those monsters to give this monster an attack boost, which means you would just go minus trying to give this card an attack increase. Also, the monster didn't take synchros and instead offset this by burning your opponent for 1000 every time a synchro is summoned. Even if it's larger than your opponent's synchro, thanks to how its attack is boosted, you'd lose out on the chance to OTK your opponent, as they would still have a big bot in your way to stop the OTK, such as the synchro monster that you couldn't take. Another important factor to add is none of the synchro effects were negated, so cards like Scrap Dragon or later introduced synchros like Trishula or Brionic could care less about Asterisk even existing. Asterisk wasn't a good card to run, and it was better to use Grinnell and Skill as the actual boss monsters. The field spell for Tizimo the Mobile Fortress lets you special summon a Meklord army monster once per turn. There was Meklord Fortress, another field spell that prevents your Meklord Emperor monsters from being targeted by synchro monster effects. When this card is destroyed and sent to the grave, you can add a Meklord Emperor monster from your deck to your hand. Draw power was even made for Meklords, as Boon of the Meklord Emperor allows you to draw 2 cards if there are 2 face-up Meklord monsters, but you can't conduct your battle phase the turn you activate this effect. The Resolute Meklord Army was a continuous spell that made all of your attack position Meklord Army monsters indestructible by battle, but negated their effects. Finally, Reboot was a normal spell that lets you shuffle 1 Meklord monster from your hand into your deck to return 1 Meklord monster from your grave to your hand. The field spells are about as good as they get for our synchro-hating archetype. For Tizimo gave you the extra special summon so you could set up your plays for Asterisk. At the same time, Meklord Fortress continued the hatred for pure white cards and protected you from being targeted by synchros, and when it's destroyed, adds a Meklord Emperor to your hand. However, the issue is that it needs to go to the graveyard, making it useless if it's banished after destruction. That's about as good as the spells were back in 2011 for Meklords. The rest of the support was a drastic drop-off, pun intended. Their draw power required exactly 2 Meklords on the field and no other monsters, and even if you met the requirement, you'd once again have another card that stopped you from battling. The Resolute Meklord Army forgot that there were more Meklords in life than just the army, and Reboot made you -1 to recover a card. The spells didn't really scream playable deck with no flaws. The traps, however, did make life a bit easier to summon the Meklord Emperors, starting with Chaos Infinity. Chaos Infinity was a normal trap that changed all defense position monsters of the field to face-up attack position. Then you can summon a Meklord monster from your deck or graveyard. Its effect is negated, and it's destroyed during the end phase of the turn. Meklord Factory was a normal trap that you can activate when a Meklord monster is targeted for an attack. You can then target a Meklord army monster in your graveyard, add it to your hand, and destroy the attack target. Mech Timed Blast was the final trap given to Meklords in 2011, letting you target 1 card your opponent controls and 1 face-up Meklord monster and destroy both targets. All of these cards have one thing in common. They guarantee that your Meklord monster will be destroyed by a card effect, except for Chaos Infinity. Your opponent might have enough time to punch whatever Meklord you bring out in the face. Also, the fact that they were traps meant that they were slow and easy pickings for your opponent's MSTs. If you ignore all the cons, you'll realize that the cards make you less dependent on needing your opponent to pop your monsters. You now have 3 traps that destroy your cards, making it easier to summon your Meklord Emperor if you have them. Finding the silver lining for this archetype is tough, and many players in the TCG community had the same sentiment. Though the deck had a clear way they wanted to play, the support lacked consistency and synergy. The archetype was already suffering due to having a sub-archetype inside of it, having multiple cards based solely on one part of the deck instead of the whole archetype, like how the cards Meklord Fortress only protected the Meklord Emperors and not your army monsters. There was no search power except for Army of Skill, who only fetch other army monsters by battle, and Fortress, who only got to search when destroyed and sent to the graveyard. Being born in an era you're supposed to be dominant in doesn't matter if the support gives inconsistent results and all-around rough gameplay. In September of 2011, Konami released the 3rd member of the Meklord Emperor, Meklord Emperor Weasel, as the September Shonen Jump promo card. A Dark Machine type monster with 2500 attack and defense that had the same condition as the other Meklord Emperors to be special summoned. Other monsters you control couldn't attack, and once per turn, if your opponent activated a spell, you can negate the activation and destroy that card. Oh, and you can't forget that you can target your opponent's Synchro monster and equip it to Weasel and it will gain its attack. If Grinnell was just run because it can come out as a big body, then you know Weasel was splashed into decks due to its effect. If you play Yu-Gi-Oh, you know we love negates, especially if it's a spell negation. A 2500 attack stat spell negation was okay in Meklords, but it's an excellent attack as a main or side deck option depending on what you were playing. Players determined that it was too good of an option to pass up playing the card, even though the options to pop your cards yourselves were limited. So just like Grinnell, it was mainly used to punish your opponent for using card effects to pop your monsters. You still had a monster like Scrap Dragon that could pop one of your monsters and one of your opponents, and then summon Weasel off its effect. However, as metas increased in speed, the community deemed the combo too inconsistent to keep playing. Then in late 2011-2012, these black cards that you might have heard of called XCs appeared on the Yu-Gi-Oh radar. Turns out they're pretty good cards that Meklords could only stare at like deers in a headlight. It only gets worse from here on out. The more extra deck options that came out, the more Meklords faded into obscurity. Though Synchros never died out, XCs, pendulums, and even the resurgence in fusion monsters made this deck's mechanics obsolete. Even decks that didn't utilize the extra deck had no issues blowing past this deck. This deck was quickly forgotten as fast as the villains in the 5D anime until 2020 when legacy support was released for it in the legendary duelist Rage of Ra. How do you make a deck built around stopping Synchros great in a format that isn't built just around Synchro monsters anymore? You just make it an OTK archetype, of course. In Ra's Rage, the archetype received 4 new monsters, 2 new spells, and a trap card. Its newest boss monster, Meklord Astro Dragon Triskelion, was a level 10 Dark Machine with 3000 attack and 0 defense. It can't be normal summoned or set, and must be special summoned by banishing 3 Meklord monsters from your graveyard. Once per turn, when it declares an attack, you can look at your opponent's extra deck and equip 1 monster from it to this card. It gains attack equal to the combined attack of the monsters equipped to it, and can make up to 3 attacks on monsters that turn. Meklord Army Deployer Obligado was a level 4 light machine monster that lets you destroy this card during your main phase. If you do, you can special summon 2 Meklord Army monsters from your deck in defense position, but for the rest of the turn, you're locked into machine monsters. If this card is also sent to the graveyard during the end phase, you can inflict 100 damage to your opponent for each Meklord monster you control. Meklord Nucleus Infinity Core was level 1 Dark Machine that can't be destroyed by battle the first time it would be destroyed each turn. When you normal summon or special summon a monster this turn, you can add a Meklord spell trap from your deck to your hand. Also, if a card effect destroys it, you can special summon a Meklord Emperor from your deck or hand with a different attribute than this card, ignoring its summoning conditions, but you can only declare an attack with 1 monster after this effect. To wrap up the monster support, a new yet lazily named Meklord Emperor was made for the archetype, Meklord Emperor Weasel Synchro Absorption, which was a level 1 Dark Machine with the same stats as the original Weasel. However, instead of the usual summon conditions of the other Emperors, its quick effect allowed this card to be special summoned by sending a face-up Meklord monster on your side of the field to the grave during your opponent's turn once per turn. You can target 1 monster your opponent controls to make it unable to attack for the turn, and when a card or effect that would destroy a card on the field is activated, you can tribute this card to negate that effect and destroy it. Both Obligado and Infinity Core helped in major ways in consistency for the deck. Obligado fetched your 2 machine monsters that help the deck get more monsters in the field while meeting the requirements for you to play your Meklord Emperor due to its effect of destroying it. That allowed you to have 3 monsters for cards like Astro Dragon Asterisk, or if you were actually a sane person, an Xyz or a Link play while having a card like Meklord Emperor Weasel on the field at best. On top of that, the combo could fetch you Infinity Core, which helped you get your Meklord spells and traps, and could float into another Emperor if it was removed by anybody's card effect. Astro Dragon Triskelion was also the deck's best boss monster. Needing just 3 Meklords in the grave was easy to achieve, as well as the card's effect to clear boards and steal your opponent's extra deck monsters, and will give you information what your opponent is playing. On top of that, you could potentially clear boards with this card if it's equipped with a Synchro. Moral of the story, branded players are safe because, yet again, the need to make the deck float around Synchro mechanics screwed the card over. At best, you can take one of their key pieces or strongest monsters to inflict serious damage and mess up your opponent's combos on their turn. At worst, you face a deck that has no need for Synchros and could possibly remove your glass shell for a boss monster from the field with the plethora of extra deck or main deck options today's game has. The spell option Meklord Assembly was a continuous that added a Meklord monster from your deck when activated. Once per turn, you can activate the effects of discarding a card to target one monster you control, destroy it, or targeting one other face-up spell and trap card and destroying it if a face-up Meklord you control is destroyed. Meklord Deflection was a quick play that lets you target a Meklord monster to make its attack become the combined original attack of all Meklord monsters of the field permanently, but your opponent doesn't take any battle damage in battles involving this card. If your Meklord monster is destroyed, you can banish this card from the graveyard instead. Finally, Meklord Asteroid Eradicator was their trap card that targeted 3 Meklord monsters with different names in your grave to either add them to your hand or special summon them to your side of the field, ignoring their summon conditions. But then you're locked into machine monsters on the turn that its card is activated. You can also banish this card from your grave to destroy one Synchro monster on the field and inflict damage to your opponent equal to that monster's original attack. Assembly was everything the deck needed all in one. Searchability, back row hate, and poppy monsters when you needed them gone. The best gift was given to Meklords, while Deflection was the cool prank that no one wanted in a card. Combining the original attack of all Meklord monsters might be redundant, as your boss monsters already come with high attack power. There's also the underlying fact that it's a pointless boost since you couldn't inflict battle damage with the monster, solidifying that this card is not worth running. Eradication would be a solid one-of if the deck didn't become more focused on OTKing your opponent. However, since that was the case, you couldn't run the card based on your deck going second. The deck did have a solid thing going for it, and that was the archetype being machine base. The generic support for machines was plentiful, even up to the link format with cards like Gigant X and Guildford Genius available to machine decks who can make them. Players also had cards to boost their potential for successful OTK and limited removal. One limited removal placed on an Astro Dragon Triskelion with a stolen extract monster is almost 100% a win. However, Meklord wasn't strong against multiple interruptions or just one in general. With the deck being made in a time when hand traps and interruptions weren't vast, the deck didn't have anything like extensions to help them play. So while the deck got new support, that support was its entire lifeline, henceforth making it the crucial choke point for anyone to stop it. So for our Meklord players who are sobbing uncontrollably, holding their wrath in for pure white cardboard, want to see the Crimson Dragon rue the day, or just wish that every day at Master Duel was Synchro Festival Day, this video isn't one of hope. Being focused on one aspect of the extra deck would never survive in the ever-changing game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because even when it had its chance to shine, it flopped, being a brickathon with only 2 good cards that were made meta-relevant for a short time. The new support barely passes as good, as it's too easy to interrupt with 1 to 2 hand traps, or if going second, can't go through multiple negates to get the OTK going. It's a punishment only a villain's deck deserves, especially one with a monster named Weasel. Lame name, lame deck, and the lamest season of the Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds earns this deck an introduction into the Failed Cards and Mechanics Hall of Fame.